This part 2 video discusses Germany and China's latest shift in strategy to lay an economic siege to the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and Israel to start the Third World War. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. In part 1 video, we discussed how since 2014, Germany and China have been trying to start the Third World War by provoking the United States, first by using the latest weapon systems to bring down Malaysian, Indonesian, Ukrainian, and Ethiopian airliners and US military helicopters and Osprey aircraft. Then they tried to use their proxies, Iran and India, to start the war. But the USA killed the two countries' top generals Soleimani and Bipin Rawat, which put an end to those plans. Then they tried to inveigle the Taliban regime in Afghanistan to attack North India and kill many Sikhs and Punjabis, allies of the USA, but the threat of use of nuclear weapons against Afghanistan caused the Taliban to pause with their plans. After that, China has installed nuclear weapons in Afghanistan. I hope by now people understand that though the Germans don't believe that the God of the Bible is the supreme God, they still adhere to Bible prophecies and try to fulfill them. They have German masqueraders, who are people of German ancestry living in white countries, as prophets in God's church, whom they rely on for prophecy, but also pay heed to my interpretations of prophecy. On my religion website www.churchofgodmessage.com, I have shared the messages God delivered to me through angels in my free ebook, God's Messages Delivered Through Angels. The only message God delivered to me concerning prophecy is that the attack of the King of the North, which is German-led Europe, on the King of the South, an Islamic African power, mentioned in Daniel 11:40-45, takes place during the last 1 year of the 3.5-year-long Great Tribulation, after the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and Israel are defeated by German-led Europe and their other alliance partners. God's Church's previous understanding of the sequence of this prophecy and end-time events, also believed by German masquerader prophets, was that this attack takes place first, leading to the defeat of the United States, Britain, and Israel. Church's understanding was also that Babylon, spoken of in prophecy and mentioned in Revelation 18, refers to German-led seventh resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. Prophecy also indicates that Babylon in the end time will be destroyed by kings of the East, including Russia. However, German masquerader prophets believed that the Babylon refers to the land mass of ancient Babylon, which is mostly in Iraq and Syria today, in which Iran is deeply entangled. They also believe that Iran will be the king of the south, spoken of in Daniel 11 verses 40-45. To fulfill prophecy according to their understanding, against what God had revealed to me, Germany set up Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi as leader of ISIL or ISIS, an Islamic caliphate in Iraq, Syria, in the area of ancient Babylon. Their plan was to attack and destroy ISIL to fulfill prophecies about the defeat of Babylon. Then they would attack and destroy Iran to fulfill the prophecy in Daniel 11:40-45 about the attack of the King of the North on the King of the South. After that, they would attack the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and Israel. I simply laughed when I realized what their plans were, because they were contrary to what God had revealed to me. Things didn't go as planned by Germany and German masqueraders in the United States. ISIL was destroyed by the USA and other coalition forces, and later al-Baghdadi was killed. They seem to have accepted the sequence revealed to me that the King of the North, which is German-led Europe, will attack the King of the South after the defeat of the United States, Britain, and Israel by the King of the North. They then concentrated their efforts on provoking a war with the United States, Britain, and Israel, which, as already explained, they have been trying to do since 2014. However, these attempts are also contrary to my interpretations of prophecy, with which the masquerader prophets also agree. As explained in part 1 video, the events in the defeat of the United States, British Commonwealth nation and Israel are prophesied in Ezekiel 5 verses 1 to 3, as explained in my ebook World and Bible Prophecy, available free on my religion website www.churchofgodmessage.com. This is what I wrote in chapter 5. Ezekiel 5 1 to 2 provides details about this war and what follows soon after. And you, son of man, take a sharp knife, take a barber's razor, and cause it to pass upon your head and upon your beard. Then take balances to weigh and divide the hair. You shall burn with fire a third part in the midst of the city, when the days of the siege are fulfilled. And you shall take a third part and smite about it with a knife, and a third part you shall scatter in the wind, and I will draw out a sword after them. This prophecy indicates that the Israelite countries, that's USA, Britain, Canada, White South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, are first going to be besieged, most likely an economic siege for a period of 390 days. That siege is described in Ezekiel 4 verses 3 to 6, which state, Then take an iron pan, place it as an iron wall between you and the city, and turn your face toward it. It will be under siege, and you shall besiege it. This will be a sign to the people of Israel. Then lie on your left hand and put the sin of the people of Israel upon yourself. You are to bear their sin for the number of days you lie on your side. I have assigned you the same number of days as the years of their sin. So for 390 days you shall bear the sin of the people of Israel. After you finish this, lie down again, this time on your right side, and bear the sin of the people of Judah. I have assigned you 40 days, a day for each year. These prophecies clearly indicate that the destruction of the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and Israel will be preceded by an economic siege. This interpretation was also given by Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong, through whom God founded the modern era of his church. That has been my interpretation as well since about 2007, when I wrote the first draft of my ebook World and Bible Prophecy. It seems that the Germans and German masqueraders have now come to the realizations that their attempts to start the Third World War have not succeeded, because they were trying to do it in ways not indicated by Bible prophecy. After their experience with ISIL set up in 2014 and their other attempts to provoke a war with the United States, they now seem to have changed their strategy to fit in with Bible prophecy, which is to lay an economic siege to the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and Israel for 13 months before the 30-day war to conquer these nations, as prophesied in Hosea 5 verse 7, is fulfilled. Now the verse 7 states, they have dealt treacherously against the Lord, for they have begotten strange children. Now shall a month, means 30 days, devour them with their portions. They now know that the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and Israel will not be conquered before an economic siege of these nations for about 13 months. In part 1 video, I described the following attempts of the German masqueraders in the United States, China, India, and other nations to lay an economic siege to the United States. There are also additional details provided for each of these methods. First is the use of German masqueraders and their allies. Germany and China plan to use German masqueraders and their allies in the United States, Britain, and Israel, in addition to the Palestinians, to the hilt in the economic siege. They can rely 100% on their sport because tens of millions have participated in murders of more than 10 million whites in America alone, and forced 30 to 40 million white babies to be aborted. Other white Americans are bringing these murderers to justice by killing them in the hundreds every week. Therefore, in order to escape justice, they are just waiting to start a civil war as soon as Germany and China start the war against the United States, Britain, and Israel with an economic siege. They will fully support the siege. They also have substantial control of government and the military in our nations, which is demonstrated by the United States appropriating 113 billion in 2022 alone to support Ukraine in the war, while with Russia and UK appropriating 7.43 billion, while Germany, which instigated the war, has provided only $2.12 billion in all types of aid. Further evidence of masquerader readiness to fully participate in the economic siege comes from the train derailment in the town of East Palatine, Ohio on February 3, 2023, when 38 train cars of Norfolk Southern Corporation were derailed. From the response of the authorities and information from my sources indicates that the town folk were responsible for the disaster. They perhaps did not know that the train was carrying toxic materials. Therefore, they did not know they would be causing a potential environmental disaster for themselves. The attitude of the authorities seems to be to let the culprits, the East Palestine folk, stew in the mess they have already created. A second Norfolk Southern train derailed in Springfield, Ohio on Saturday, March 4, 2022. Though some of the cars carried hazardous materials, none leaked. This too was not an accident but the work of German masqueraders. In fact, just in Ohio, there have been 4 train derailments since the past 5 months. Besides train derailments, occurring fairly regularly in the United States, that's over 1,000 a year, and passenger airplane near misses being an indication that German masqueraders have become more active in causing disasters in the United States, we are also experiencing unprecedented fire seasons for the past 5 to 6 years. These fires are deliberately set by masqueraders to destroy much property and lives. Some arsonists have been arrested. There have also been attacks on the electric grid in diverse places. With all these incidents, German masqueraders are signaling that they are ready to burn cities by setting them on fire. They are ready to drastically disrupt railroad, air, and transportation to make the transportation of food, medicines, and other critical goods impossible, to exacerbate famines and diseases. They are likely to destroy the electric grid, which itself will quickly kill the sick, weak, and the elderly, the very young, and hospitals would be shut down, as it would be impossible for doctors and nurses to function. In short, German masqueraders have been indicating for the past 7 to 8 years that they are ready for a deadly civil war in the United States and British Commonwealth nations that would kill hundreds of millions in these countries. Now, new evidence of German masqueraders' substantial control in the government in the USA, UK, Canada, and Australia comes from the recent protests and vandalism at Indian embassies by 6 separatists known as Khalistanis. Most of the Khalistanis and all their leaders are not Punjabi Sikhs but Rajput and Pathan Sikhs who are allied with the Germans. The separatist movement is being kept alive to malign Punjabi Sikhs who have no interest in a separate Sikh state. When the Khalistanis protested at Indian embassies and consulates on March 1920 in United States, UK, Canada, and Australia, the country's governments did not protect the Indian embassies. They turned the Indian government against these nations and also maligned Punjabi Sikhs in India and nations around the world. That indicates that German masqueraders have substantial control over the government in the United States, UK, Canada, and Australia. That's why they're willing to malign their own countries. Protests by the Khalistanis would also make it acceptable in the eyes of the world community for India to demonize and attack Sikhs because they are seeking to divide the country, as separatist movements all over the world do not find sympathy in any country. German masqueraders' goal is to keep racial hatreds in the United States, Britain, and Israel at fever pitch always. One way they do this is to encourage African Americans and other minorities, particularly those whose lives are going nowhere, to continue murdering whites of non German ancestry. If they get away with their crimes, they will be fabulously financially rewarded by the masqueraders. If they are arrested and injured by police, lawsuit, the civil rights lawsuit will probably have them be rewarded with multi-million-dollar judgments for them and their families to enjoy for the rest of their lives, and comfort to continue to receive masquerader help financially with jobs in their businesses. If they die in a police encounter, then the families will receive multiple $1 million settlements. They'll feel proud that they have provided for their families. Whenever there are police shootings of black and Hispanic people, Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and others, such as attorney Ben Crump, are given repeated opportunities to whip up more racial hatred and keep it at fever pitch, so that minorities will be already ready to participate in the civil war and economic siege of our countries. Yet another method being used to keep racial hatreds at fever pitch is to use woke propaganda and clamor for critical race theory and black history to be taught in schools and colleges as compulsory subjects. Courses are designed to open fresh wounds, generate racial hatreds instead of healing relations. The German masqueraders and their minority allies in the United States had indicated in many other ways their intentions to fully participate in the siege of our nations. Number 2, driving Russia away from the United States and Britain. German masquerader leaders, with their support of Ukraine and its war with Russia, have driven Russia away from the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and Israel when it faces an existential threat in the war from China and NATO into the waiting arms of China, from Germany and NATO into the waiting arms of China. China benefits from heavily discounted energy supplies from Russia. Economic sanctions have forced Russia to also become dependent on China for supply of semiconductors and other technology items. According to Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, former National Security Advisor, and President Trump's resignation, China is already supplying lethal weapons to Russia, though it continues to deny it. Number 3, de-dollarization of global economy. Financial and banking sanctions have forced Russia to move away from the dollar and euro transaction into doing business in the yuan, including Russia, Germany, and UK, have joined India in doing trade transactions denominated in Indian rupees. China has already brokered an agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran to restore diplomatic relations between the two countries. China imports about 40% of its hydrocarbon needs from the Gulf region. Scientists against Iran have driven it away from the West and into close relationships with China and Russia. The Saudi royal family is being hounded by America for the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, and the Saudi consulate in Turkey, souring relations between the two countries. China seems to have long-term goals in mind in developing close relationships with Saudi Arabia. One of those goals is to have petroleum and trade between Saudi Arabia and Iran, with China demonstrated away from dollars into the Chinese yuan for imports into China. This too will help China and Germany's de-dollarization strategy. Number 4, China's leverage over global economy. About 140 nations are involved with China in its Belt and Road Initiative, with railway, road, air, and transports and seaports. The other projects and are indebted to China with high interest loans, some very heavily and are likely to default. These nations are in no position to refuse if China demands that they abide by its transactions, which is part of the siege on the United States British Commonwealth nation in Israel. China's fishing fleets that traverse oceans globally are dual-use vessels and are part of the Chinese Navy. They can be used to keep such nations in line to enforce such siege. China controls the river waters of Southeast and South Asian nations through strategically built dams. It can withhold whatever amounts to destroy their agricultural product cause floods. Those nations will fall in line in a hurry to comply with its demands during a siege. The ultimate leverage China has over the United States and British Commonwealth nations is that it is a direct major player in the supply chains for many consumer goods industries. It is also an important player in the supply chains of other nations which supply goods to the United States and Britain, because many ingredients for manufacture of end consumer products are sourced from China. For example, India's pharmaceutical industry, a key supplier for generic drugs to the USA, sources maybe of many of its ingredients from China. Number 5, relations with Mexican drug cartels. The US does major trade with Mexico, which ranked second after Canada among all US trading partners. Indications are that China has developed relationships with Mexican drug cartels. With suitable incentives, the drug cartels could be used by China to impede trade with the USA by disrupting transactions. Besides the above methods identified in Part 1 video, groundwork is being laid for use of the following methods. Number 6, sabotage using information technology. Americans in Britain simply don't realize how vulnerable they have made themselves to sabotage using information technology. Prophecy in Ezekiel gives us an idea why the Germans and the Chinese have made tremendous efforts in developing the capability to hack our government, private industry, and computers. Events in 7 to 14 state, they have blown the trumpet even to make ready, but none goes to the battle, for my wrath is against all the people thereof. This prophecy indicates that modern Israel, meaning America, British Commonwealth nation, and Israel, will have made all preparations to go to war, but no one will go, as most likely they will not be able to receive the signal to do so. Masqueraders report also agrees on this interpretation. Heads of some of the most powerful technology companies are Indians who are allied with the Germans, which include Microsoft, Alphabet, and IBM. In addition, most of important technology companies have operations in India, which allows Indians access to the computer systems. In the war with India allied with Germany and China, nobody should have an iota of doubt that Indians employed by some companies or heading them will work with the German masqueraders and the Akalis to lay an economic siege of the United States and Britain, and then in the full-scale World War. In addition, these IT players could play a dominant role in disrupting transportation systems, utilities, electric grids, as well as healthcare systems by hacking computer systems to spread chaos in America and British society. I see first-hand evidence of this in my personal computer. I had to get away from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the company many attempts to get away to pay off all their bill services, which would have then likely go viral and all the software state providers will become multi-billion-dollar companies. I finally gave up MS operating system CSC and switched entirely to Apple. I use Safari as my built-in browser, but I believe Google keeps sending me messages and disrupting my Apple computer to get me to switch to Chrome rather than Safari as my search engine information on the internet, and Google pays Apple about $22 billion annually for Apple to not develop its own search engine. Much of what I do has a tendency to go viral. Tech companies have had experience with that. That's why Google's aims seems to be to force me to switch from Safari to Chrome by sending messages that I'll be better have a better experience with my small and then interfering with the working of my mother. Such hacking of my computer by Google and disrupting my use by other annoying and time wasting advisors. But I show mercy, headed by Indians, will not hesitate to join the masqueraders' side in an attempt to lay an economic siege of the United States effort. The USA has imposed very punishing sanctions on Iran for continuing to develop nuclear weapons to use against Israel and control the Middle East. The Iranian economy and the people are hurting. It's easy to understand why Iran would become a natural ally of China and Russia against the United States, British Commonwealth nation, and Israel. China has brokered a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran to restore diplomatic relations. It hopes to achieve against certain goals by having friendly relations with the two countries. First, as started earlier, China imports about 40% of its hydrocarbon needs from the Gulf region. It wants to ensure that its supplies through the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point in the Gulf, will not be interrupted by Iran. Since Iran considers the USA as an enemy and China has already said to use Iran to start a war with the United States, in any economic siege of the United States, British Commonwealth nation, and Israel, Iran will be a willing partner. It could disrupt oil supplies to nations that do not go along with siege. It would also escalate a conflict with the United States by attacking its ships because at present USA ensures free flow of goods through the Persian Gulf. China also hopes to move both countries away from the dollar denomination of petroleum trade to possibly using the Chinese yuan. The United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan that formed toward normal ties with Israel 2 years ago. These motives were driven by fear of Iran. Saudi Arabia could also move to normalize relations with Israel. Chinese mediation in normalizing relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia could forestall such a move. This would help Iran's strategy to isolate Israel and making it easier to lay an economic siege of the industry in alliance with China. Iran is set to become a permanent member of the Shanghai Cooperation Council, or SCO, in April 2023. To help achieve all these goals, China could invite Saudi Arabia to become a member of SCO at some stage, as well as part of the BRICS, which are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the alliance. Even then, Iran could be invited to become the BRICS chief, and as it has already been with Russia, India, and China. Now, Iran's goal is to become a leader of the Islamic world, and China's goal is to use them as Iran, to use such Iran as an energy alliance partner in their attack on the United States, British Commonwealth nation, and Israel. And they ally all the Sikhs and Punjabis in India, preceded by an economic siege. It seems China and Germany's plans are succeeding. Russia has shown its willingness to engage in conflict with the United States. Recently, Iran-backed groups launched rocket and drone attacks on U.S. embassies on Syria on March 23, 2023 that killed an American contractor, wounded another, and also hurt 5 U.S. troops. The U.S. military carried out retaliatory airstrikes of Syria against non-aligned groups on the same day. There were further counterattacks by both sides. John Kirby, National Security Council spokesman, said that there have been 78 attacks by Iran-backed groups since 2021. They don't seem to be deterred by our threats, she said. He added. Situation in Israel. While Israel is working from the outside against Israel, the country has its traditional Arab enemies. Israel regularly carries out attacks in Syria against groups allied with Iran for their attempts to supply weapons to Hezbollah in Afghanistan. The Palestinians in Israel always keep the situation in Israel fluid and will never allow peace to return to the land because they are manipulated by Germany. They consider starting an explosion of violence in very short time and disrupt economic life. The situation among the Jews has also been in turmoil over the past some years. In the 4 years from 2018 to 2022, there have been 5 general elections. Besides, no coalition had been able to form a stable government since 2019. Finally, after the November 1, 2022 election and negotiations between the parties, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was able to form a government which was sworn in on December 29, 2022 with a majority of 14 in a 120 member Knesset. However, Benjamin Netanyahu still faces cases of corruption involving media moguls and worthy supporters on charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust stemming from allegations including trading favors to member groups in exchange for positive press coverage. To avoid being removed from office, the ruling government started a push for a broad judicial reform to curb the powers of the Israeli Supreme Court, which exercises authority to set aside new laws and cabinet appointments based on reasonability. However, various Israeli soldiers accuse the government of attacking democracy. There have been street protests and hunger strikes since January 7, 2023, after Saturday in cities across the country and on sweepstakes in some locations. On September 11, 2023 protests, organizers said that as many as 500,000 demonstrators took part in the largest demonstration in the country's history, according to the newspaper Haaretz. Though Prime Minister Netanyahu has agreed to delay the reforms for a month, the demonstrations continue. Thus, stability in the Israeli government and situation among the Jews is tenuous. To create a crisis with a slim majority, defections by German masqueraders in the Knesset could bring the government down quickly, plunging the country into turmoil again. Even the activist Supreme Court could possibly remove Netanyahu because of corruption charges against him. Just as in the US and Britain, I expect many masqueraders to be members of the Israeli Knesset and represented by the government. On the surface, it seems far-fetched that a Germany, China, and India-led alliance would suddenly lay an economic siege to the United States, British Commonwealth nation, and Israel. But consider the fact that they have tried many tactics since 2014 to start the Third World War, but have not succeeded. It shows they want to start the war. How much easier would it be to begin with an economic siege and then starting a shooting war. Once they made the decision to use this option, they could begin implementing it within days or weeks. The information that I have provided shows that Germany and China have an enormous amount of leverage to convince many nations and groups to go with their plans, using threats and coercion where necessary to severely restrict trade with the white English speaking peoples, which effectively would be an economic siege. The siege could begin clandestinely but would soon become obvious to our nations when the goods they want are not being supplied and there are few buyers for their goods and services also. In part 3 video, I will explain how multiple Bible prophecies will be fulfilled during the economic siege and then how the full-scale war will follow. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, how Bible prophecy is playing an important role in world affairs, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook channels Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini to view and get information on the latest videos.